Your retainer, Kaimali, he's quite an exceptional fellow. He takes some getting used to, Shulk replied, but I think so too. Kaimali's worked hard to become who he is today. She wouldn't have thought of it that way when they were younger. Back then, everyone saw him as a troublemaker at best. Even the local merchants never gave him a chance, which was strange considering how well he was doing as one now. Shulk supposed that one hungry city youth didn't look much different from any other in their eyes. Kaimali's decision to divide their guests into two distinct parties was based on their social standing, but not in the way that one would usually see things. Having the visiting merchants lead the way allowed Marzli and the other lords, including herself, to gain their conversational bearings while the merchants endlessly chatted away about everything of interest. Not that Marzli chose the same topics to discuss, not directly, at least. Roland Gork teeters on the edge of anarchy. Marzli stroked his jowls as his merchants expressed their admiration over a set of metal tools, yet Osalopakan has brought unprecedented prosperity to a place most well known for its abject poverty. I can only wonder what sort of magic you've worked over the city, Eelinksok. It's nothing that we weren't capable of before, Marzli, Shulk replied. If the right people and opportunities had lined up generations ago, Kostorafikeral would be a very different place from what it is today. Let's not be so humble, Eelinksok, Marzli made a sweeping gesture with a paw. Luck may have played an important role here, but luck alone is woefully insufficient to achieve all this. My introduction just now was not merely composed of empty words. I truly sense the greatness that is within you. I wish I could sense the greatness that is within me. She thought she had gotten used to the eerie manner in which people seemed to gravitate towards her, but having a lord from another city end up the same way was beyond bizarre. Mitra was capable of doing some incredible things as a bard, so maybe it was Winter Moon's doing this time. Greatness is the last thing on my mind right now, Shulk said. All of the prosperity that you see here will mean nothing if it cannot spread to the rest of Rolenborg. I don't mean to come across as patronizing, but, do you understand the situation in which our people currently find themselves? The prolonged flooding is wreaking havoc with the herds in the lowlands, Marzli said. Before spring, most of Rolenborg will be starving, fighting one another over what scraps of food remain. It will mean the end of our confederation. That's it? Enatazli Osalo Atazli hasn't mentioned anything to you? Shulk asked. Enatazli? Marzli's steps slowed. I haven't heard anything from him since he went west with his warriors to the Draconic Kingdom. Then whoever is leading Osalo Atazli in his absence? Marzli only gave her an uncomprehending look in return. How about the dispatch of forces to the east that happened last month? Shulk asked. The representatives that landed in Atazli told us that reinforcements were needed in the east since we had already dedicated a large portion of our forces to the west, Marzli answered. It seemed reasonable enough to me and helped thin out our numbers ahead of the coming crisis. If you're asking about matters related to the warrior clans, Eelinksok, should you not know more about them than I? She apparently did, if only through pure happenstance. It wasn't the best of places to discuss everything Marzli wasn't aware of, however, so Shulk settled on mentally grousing over the way that the clans had segregated themselves and all of the problems it led to. Then let's focus on your realm of expertise, Shulk said. First, I'd like to understand how Atazli is run. I've only been far from Kostorafikeral once. From what I've seen, things work very differently in the rest of Rolenborg. What you say should be true for most of Kostorafikeral existence, Marzli replied. But does Osalopakan not operate in the same manner as the other warrior clans? How should I explain this? Shulk cast a wistful glance at Winter Moon, wishing that she could speak in her stead. The bard was so powerful, eloquent, and knew pretty much everything. It had taken Shulk months to grasp the basics of what she had shared with her, and the only way she could convey her understanding of it was through her own, highly limited knowledge. We don't collect tribute if that's what you mean, Shulk said. Then how do you keep things going? Marzli asked. Without the other clans. There are no other clans, Shulk's voice rose by a notch. Not in Korstorofi anyway. Osalo-Pakan isn't like any warrior clan that you know. We shouldn't even be calling it Osalo-Pakan since we aren't an Osalo clan anymore. In Marzli and his companions fell silent, each bearing equally unsettled expressions. She could understand the reason behind their discomfort, though she thought it was pretty silly. For as long as everyone could remember, their society had been divided between the ruling warrior clans and everyone else. Korstorofi, on the other hand, had no clans to speak of and everyone lived in mixed communities, so what most considered an unspoken taboo didn't feel out of sorts for Shork and the other residents of the city. It isn't rare for individuals to climb their way up into the ranks of a clan, Marzli said carefully, but they are generally individuals who have proven their worth. How can a clan ensure the quality and conduct of its members without strict requirements for entry? Surely not everyone is fit to become a mighty warrior or skilled artisan. Not everyone needs to become one, Shork said. At the same time, it's not so hard to find worth in any individual. The people of this city have always needed to prove their worth in order to survive. And the clans accept the best of those people, Marzli said. We are the elite for a reason. Becoming less than what we are not only weakens our position, but also blunts the ambitions of talented individuals who wish to join our ranks. This is a debate for a less pressing occasion, Shork said. I was merely pointing the difference in our clan's structure out to help explain how we maintain our operations. Ahead of them, Kaimali stuck out his thumb in a weirdly human gesture. His approval was lost on their guests as a result, but not Shork. The Merchants Guild considered the population of Rolengork as a huge labor pool for her clan's economic ambitions. Every migrant that came to the city looking for work was a win in their eyes, so letting the other clans cling to their old ways only benefited Osalo-Pakan. For Shork's part, she didn't like excluding people for arbitrary reasons. The races of Rolengork were social by nature, though clearly not as social as races like humans, and keeping people out of the group was a hateful idea to her. I can only imagine that having an all-inclusive clan is a nightmare to finance and manage, Marzli said. We lords can only handle so much as you must know. On the contrary, Shork said, being able to harness and direct the whole population makes it easier for us to achieve our objectives as a clan. As for management issues, we're in the process of organizing the communities of the city into new tribes. That probably made Osalo-Pakan sound even stranger to her guests. They were accustomed to letting outsiders fend for themselves, trying to create new tribes was just extra work. More importantly, it meant giving away hunting grounds and pasturage for them to live on. Those tribes will all exist as a part of Osalo-Pakan, Shork continued, and everyone is subject to the same taxation system. Taxation? It took a moment for Shork to realize that Marzli had probably heard some gibberish since he wasn't familiar with the term. It's similar to the tolls that cities and towns charge for the use of their infrastructure, Shork said. On top of infrastructure, however, our taxes pay for security, sanitation, administrative costs, and a few other things that are necessary for city life. Is that not the purpose of tribute? Marzli asked. The warrior clans receive tribute so that they can focus on training warriors and maintaining their fighting edge. In exchange, tributaries receive their protection. It's not the same, Shork answered, though the parallel you've drawn isn't a bad one. Tribute is offered by tribes while taxes apply to households and individual purchases. Legally speaking, that means every taxpayer is entitled to the same benefits under Osalo-Pakan. But what if one person pays more than another? Shouldn't they be prioritized since their contribution is greater? They didn't have anyone like that yet, so Shork wasn't sure how to answer. She knew it was something like a trap for tributaries, however. Each tribe and clan offered as much as they reasonably could, hoping that their suzerain would allocate more security forces to them. That would depend on the situation, Shork said. Everyone in our territory should enjoy the same security. Things are nice and peaceful here, so I don't think anyone would ask for more. As for our clansfolk that travel abroad, merchants and the like lease our ships, which come with security forces. At any rate, security is important, but it's only one aspect of Osalopakan's operations. If anything, it's everything else that generates the majority of our revenues. In theory, at least. Currently, the vast majority of her clan's current revenues weren't revenues at all. Instead, the majority of Osalopakan's revenue came from their continuous minting of copper trade coins. With the help of the Merchant Guild, her clan was taking advantage of the legitimacy of trade currency to pay everyone who worked for them or sold them stuff. This was in line with the Merchant Guild's objective of standardizing trade currency throughout Roland Gork, so they issued as much coinage as copper imports allowed. Presumably, coins gained through taxation would outpace the rate of minting at some point, but that was a long ways off yet. It seems that it will take us a while to grasp this taxation system of yours, Elingsok, in Marzli said. There is one thing that I do understand, however. Korstorofi is a teeming metropolis. I can't imagine that you can effectively collect tribute, taxes, Wintermoon said. Taxes from everyone. If they were collected as frequently as tributes are offered, it would take far too many people far too long. Not only would you need people to collect these taxes, you'd need security for each collector. Didn't I say we're nice and safe here? She had nearly forgotten how the rest of Roland Gork viewed Korstorofi. The wealthiest clans used the old clanholds scattered around the city as a central meeting place, but otherwise remained far removed from daily life. They were figuratively and literally above it all. To them, Korstorofi was a chaotic, dirty, and often dangerous place. Shulk couldn't say that they had been wrong back before the restoration of Osalopakan, but it wasn't as if 100 people were killed every day. Well, maybe a bit more than 100, but it wasn't that much. We only have trade taxes at the moment, Shulk said. Osalopakan controls the markets here, so it's a convenient way to avoid the situation you've described. I see, in Marzli eyed the stands around them. So these merchants add the tax to the cost of their goods, effectively taxing every family that frequents their stalls. Since this is a city, that's everyone. You catch on quickly, in Marzli, Shulk said. I suspect you'll adapt to everything that we've brought about in no time. Well, any good lord would recognize the flow of things with what you've mentioned. In Marzli's eyes narrowed contentedly at the compliment. Do you truly believe the changes that you've introduced to be beneficial to Roland Gork, Elingsok? I do, Shulk replied. Our ways have barely changed over the centuries, so I consider what's happening here long overdue. Furthermore, they bring us more in line with how the world outside of our jungle operates. You've been beyond our borders. And you're entertaining foreign guests. It seems that I've truly fallen behind the times. As Enmersli lamented his self-perceived backwardness, one of Shulk's foreign guests emerged from under a nearby stall. Shulk scooped up the human cub before something happened to it. Sounds of admiration rose from in Marzli's delegation. You pounced before I realized it was there, in Marzli said. Is that some kind of ape? I've never seen anything like it. What do they taste like? They are not for eating, Shulk gestured to the do not eat band on the human cub's arm. Then do you raise them for wool, perhaps? This one looks thoroughly shaven. How are we supposed to open up to the world like this? In Marzli's first assumption was that the human cub was food. Then, his thoughts logically went from food to livestock. Soraka got crazy mad when he found out how the humans in the Draconic Kingdom were being treated, but the reality was that most of Roland Gork's inhabitants naturally came to those conclusions, even those who had never seen a human before. The human cub giggled in her grip, pawing at Shulk's arms. Shulk called out to one of the market guards before hurling the child over the stands. It flew through the air with a delighted squeal before the guard leapt up and caught it. How about this creature standing on your bard's shoulder? Emmersley asked. It looks even more appetizing than that ape. That's Vltava, Shulk replied. He came from a foreign land together with Wintermoon. I suppose it's best to consider him as a sort of ornery nature spirit. You can try eating him, but I highly doubt you'd survive. I see. On the topic of foreign lands, Shulk cleared her throat. What's the last thing you've heard from Il Enatarsli? We haven't heard anything, In Marzli said. I was hoping that you might have something to share with us on that front. I see. Well, you must be famished after your journey and my court should be prepared to receive you by now. Let's discuss this over a meal, shall we? Of course, Eelink Sok. The merchants were predictably reluctant to leave the market, so Shork went ahead within Marzli and the other lords. The residents of the upper terrace, or her household, depending on who one asked, had swept away the leaves and laid out their best rugs for each guest. Her father was busy directing the chaos from one of the benches around the central fountain. Father, Shork said, where are we seating in Marzli and his companions? Allow me to take care of that, Eelink Sok. This way, please. Shork breathed a sigh of relief as the lords were led to their places. Unfortunately, two of Shork's self-appointed handmaidens lay in ambush and spirited her away to her home. They fussed over her appearance, fixing things that she was pretty sure didn't need to be fixed and making dubious additions to her already dubious appearance. A third handmaiden appeared sometime later, bowing low to her before speaking. Eelink Sok, Kaimali has requested an audience. An audience? Why can't he just walk in? That would be improper, Eelink Sok. But that would be improper, Eelink Sok. She knew all of her handmaidens from childhood and she had never seen them acting this way before. Someone must have filled their heads with nonsense recently. Fine, Shork said. I'll see him after we're done here. It took a good 30 minutes before they finished grooming her. Probably the only good thing that came of the ordeal was that she didn't have to deal with hairballs anymore. Kaimali swept his arms out in a bow as she emerged from her room and entered the house's main hall. I'm going to bite you, Shork gave her friend a sour look. Me? But why? What's that weird bow for? Actually, everyone gets more ridiculous with each passing day. It's gotten worse than a pride of Irma. Wait, is that who everyone's been copying? Oh, of course not, Kaimali's voice rose in affront. Why would we? Then where is this all coming from? Shork asked. Everyone's acting all weird all of a sudden. Don't act as if you're not doing it as well. What? Look, Kaimali pointed. You never did that before. It was only after Winter Moon and the others appeared that you started. Shork crossed her eyes to follow Kaimali's gesture, but she couldn't see anything. It was only after she turned her head to the side that she noticed the tip of her tail under her chin. You are trying to hold your tail in front of your nose like Winter Moon does, Kaimali said, but your tail is too short. Shut up. Shork pulled her tail behind her. Roland Gork is on the verge of collapse and you're staring at my tail. All I'm saying is that you've been copying the outsiders as well. People have been copying you in turn. Out of the corners of her vision, Shork caught her handmaidens tucking their tails away. Were they all that impressionable? Then again, picking up on trends was a survival skill for those who lived in Korstorifikaral. It shouldn't have been surprising that everyone was imitating behaviors from an outside world that only seemed to improve Osalo Pakan's situation with every idea introduced. But where did her friend's handmaiden behavior come from? She couldn't recall any of their visitors acting that way. So, Shork said, what did you come to see me for? I just thought you'd like a report now that we're back, Kaimali replied. How did it go? They loved it, of course, Kaimali gave her a human-like shrug. New products, new technologies, new people, they all represent new avenues for profit. To be honest, I never realized such hunger existed until recently. But we've been trading with the Great Loot for a long time, haven't we? Shork noted, if they're so desperate for new things, why not get them from there? I've only come across 2 merchants who've run the southern trade routes in all this time, Kaimali replied. Both of them say that the Loot only trades goods that are already in circulation in our markets. She didn't like the implications of that. Soraka once suggested that Roland Gork was being exploited by the merchants of the Great Loot, but she had no grasp of the gap between Roland Gork and the outside world until recently. We may need to be careful about the southern trade, she said. If the loot is purposely trying to keep us in the state we've been in for generations, they're not going to like what we're doing here. I'm not sure how we can control something like that, Kaimali said. Our goods will eventually trickle southward through trade and someone is bound to investigate their value. Maybe Master Leeds can figure something out, Shawk sighed. The last thing we need is a swarm of dragons flying over to put us back in our place. Is there anything else we need to discuss? Not particularly, Kaimali said. Ambition and fear make for interesting allies. The merchants will encourage Martsley to cooperate with us out of the fear that we might shut them out of our markets. I don't know enough about Martsley to say whether he'll listen to them or not, but I'm confident you'll sway him to our side regardless. Shawk had no idea what he based his confidence in her on, but she supposed that it didn't change what she had to do. The court was packed by the time she emerged to seat herself upon her basalt throne. Clan elders, newly appointed community leaders, and even the slumlords she was still trying to win to her side were present, making for a daunting audience that she hadn't expected. She sent her gaze across the entire court before resting her eyes upon Martsley. Martsley, she said, I trust that our hospitality is to your satisfaction? It is most gratifying, Eel Inksock. Martsley lowered his head. Even Eel Enetasley has never afforded us a welcome such as this. I can only hope that this is a sign of things to come. If only these were better times, Shawk's voice was grim. Your tour of our civilian operations will continue in the afternoon, but, before that, I must inform you of the full scope of the peril facing our confederation. Quite frankly, I'm astonished that you haven't caught wind of any of it. Have the vessels you sent to supply our forces in the Draconic Kingdom not returned with news of the conflict? Some of the barges have returned, Martsley said, but they reported nothing out of the ordinary. They delivered their cargo to a conquered human city just beyond our borders, then traded their way back up the river. Traded? Yes, the barges we used to send supplies were chartered. Since we only needed them to deliver supplies to their destination, the merchants who owned the ships were released from their obligations upon delivery and resumed their usual operations. If that was the case, Martsley's information was months behind. But that shouldn't have been the case for clans further west. She found it difficult to believe that no one had raised the alarm in the months since Roland Gork's defeat in the Draconic Kingdom. Maybe it was a warrior clan thing again. And Osalo Atasley hasn't told you anything? No, Eel Inksock. If I may ask, just what are you getting at? Our forces in the Draconic Kingdom were defeated, Shawk told him. I can only assume that they've pulled back to defend our borders. Martsley suddenly rose, his mouth hanging open in shock. What? But Osalo Atasley sent its best forces. Those were the council's instructions, so everyone must have done the same. How could such a mighty army be defeated, never mind so quickly? I don't have the specific details, Shawk said. Our forces were confident about their victory when they departed this city, so someone unexpected must have happened. What's happening in the Draconic Kingdom isn't our most pressing concern, however. How can a defeat of this magnitude not be our most pressing concern? Martsley's expression turned incredulous. Because the Yorgulans have overwhelmed our frontier defenses and are presently invading Roland Gork, Shawk told him. That was what the most recent round of recruitment was about. The warrior clans were more concerned about bolstering their numbers than they were with individual skill, which isn't a good sign. Martsley sank back onto his seat. He stared silently at the half-eaten slab of meat in front of him. I appreciate you informing us of what is going on, he said after several moments, but the warrior clans keep this sort of information to themselves for a reason. There is little that the rest of us can do but worry. You are wrong, Shawk said. That isn't the sole reason why the warrior clans don't usually share information with everyone else. They do it because they're proud. Not in a self-aggrandizing way, but it's pride nonetheless. The warrior clans consider themselves responsible for the security of the Confederation. Everyone else depends on them for protection. To ask for help from the very people who depend on them is a shame that they couldn't live with. Death before dishonor, Martsley murmured. Something like that, Shawk said. Even I'm that way most of the time. The furthest the warrior clans are willing to go is recruiting the clanless under the pretense of having them join one clan or the other. Yet you speak as though we may contribute to the war effort somehow. I know that we can, Shork said. In my time rebuilding Osalo-Pakan, I've come to realize that the potential of our people isn't anywhere near being fully harnessed. The way we've divided ourselves was only possible because what we're naturally capable of as beastmen is good enough to survive with. That very strength that has helped us to survive came with a price. Our civilization has remained the same for generations and the world has left us behind as a result. I will not allow Roland Gork to remain in this state any longer. Hundreds of pairs of eyes fixed upon her as she spoke. It was enough to make most beastmen flee in fright and confusion, but Shork only considered the undivided attention of her court as a good thing. What do you propose? Inmartzli asked. That we fight, Shork said simply. Each in the way that they're capable of. Every generation has many who aspire to become warriors, yet the warrior clans never had the means to facilitate those aspirations. Many more become trapped in the stagnant mire that Roland Gork has become, doomed to repeat the same motions as the generations that came before us. I refuse to believe that this is all we will ever amount to, and I would ask for everyone to help prove ourselves capable of overcoming the trials ahead. Shork's gaze settled upon the fountain in the center of her court, the broken projector whose purpose had long eluded the very descendants of the civilization that had created it. As lamentable as their past was, knowing about it helped them little with their present situation. What I propose is change, Shork said. A rebellion against stagnation. A rejection of the fate imposed on us by forces shrouded beyond our veil of isolation. We must escape the blindings that the demon gods have left us in for centuries, and we must do so before oblivion takes us all. Me? Please? Extending words to stress one's desires seemed to be a common behavior amongst mortals. Ilishnesh didn't know how it worked, but she had seen some success in imitating it. It didn't work on her, though. You are traveling in that direction, anyway, Shork pawed at her arm. And your memory is good. All you have to do is tell the lords that you meet during your travels what I've been telling the lords that have been visiting us here. You're better at persuading people than I am, anyway. It's not the same thing, Ilishnesh said. What do you mean? Me persuading those lords isn't the same as you doing it. This is something you want to be handling personally. I don't get it. Maybe you will one day, Ilishnesh said. Does that mean you won't help me? Shork asked. Your merchants seem to be doing a good enough job of sending people to you, Ilishnesh answered. Things have been moving along so quickly that I thought you'd appreciate some time to sort all of these guests of yours out. I can send a few thousand your way all at once if you'd like. The Osalo Lord backed away, her ears lying flat and her tail tucked between her legs. No. My hair would fall out if that happened. But it's already falling out, Ilishnesh said. What? You furry creatures shed hair constantly, Ilishnesh said. You are one of those furry creatures too, Shork told her. I'm not shedding any more than I usually do, am I? No. Shork's tense posture relaxed a bit. The Osalo Lord glanced at their surroundings before trying to enlist Ilishnesh's help again. At least help me with Narkira, Shork said. We already have a bit of a relationship with them and they're among the top 10 clans in the east. This equipment needs to count for as much as possible. If it means so much to you, then why not go personally? I would, Shork replied, but I'm too busy here. We'll be hosting representatives from 2 cities and 16 towns this week alone. They'll be insulted if I'm not around to receive them. And Narkira won't be insulted if you don't go to make your case personally. They are not even expecting us, Shork said. Our trade network hasn't come close to reaching them, so I doubt that they have any idea what we're up to. This shipment we're sending over is more like a pleasant surprise, so they should be happy to talk to anyone that we send. Are you sure about that? Who would get mad at free stuff? She supposed that the beastman had a point. Free stuff was good if one was on the receiving end. What exactly would I be telling them? Ilishnesh asked. You've attended pretty much every meeting I've had with the visiting lords, Shork answered. I'm sure you get the gist of it by now. Very well, Ilishnesh answered with a nod. I shall demand that they submit to you as subjects of a new and unified Rolengork. What? No. How in the world did you come up with that? Isn't that what all these visiting lords have been doing? They come in bowing and scraping. By the time you're done with them, you've guaranteed their compliance. In Ilishnesh's opinion, Shork was too soft on her people. However, she supposed it hardly mattered so long as she got the desired results. Unifying Rolengork worked in Ilishnesh's favor, as well. Her report to the Ministry of Transportation would be far easier, and shorter, to convey if the Merchant Guild set the standards for the country's industry and logistics. That's because we're in a weird situation, Shork told her. I've seen plenty of lords when they visited the city in the past. People like me and my clanmates barely existed to them. Now, those same lords are both figuratively and literally being washed away by these floods. People will reach for any twig that they can in that situation. If you understand that much, Ilishnesh said, why aren't you being more assertive? You hold the advantage over everyone else, and you yourself admitted that time is of the essence when addressing the problems looming over Rolengork. She had never met a lord quite like Shork before. Lady Zaradnik studied things like one would study prey, and there was absolutely no hesitation when she pounced on an issue. Nemil Gran was similar in that sense. Despite her outward displays of uncertainty, when something needed to be done, she went and did it, be it organizing migrants or conquering her neighbors. Shork, however, was like a pot of soup left unattended over a fire. She just cooked and cooked until boiling over in some charismatic display or feat of leadership. Ilishnesh idly wondered if the soup would burn at some point and what that might look like. Our problems won't be problems forever, Shork said. I have to consider what happens after that. They may not be so cooperative after the crisis is over if they consider me an unpleasant person to work with. They may choose to do so no matter how you treat them, Ilishnesh said. I've spoken of this matter with members of many races. The answers are varied, but they all tend towards the same conclusion. And what's that? Power is required to enforce compliance. All it takes is one act of unanswered defiance to undermine the people's confidence in a lord's rule. But that's basically how the gangs do things. I don't want to be some sort of evil lord who oppresses their people. Ilishnesh chuffed in amusement at the Osalo lord's words. You are conflating morality with authority, she told Shork. This illness seems to be common in the different societies of the region. Morality may determine what is and isn't just in any particular society, but it is the effective application of power that delivers justice. You may have gotten past the point where the strong eat the weak simply because they can, but, make no mistake, the strong rule in this world. Everyone exists by the grace of a greater power. I don't think I'll ever hold so much power that I can exert it over everyone. I doubt you'd need to, Ilishnesh said. You only need enough power to answer challenges to your authority. Every successfully answered challenge serves to legitimize your rule. The true problem is keeping track of everything. Mortal lords truly weren't suited to dominate their domains. All dragons had to do was patrol their territories once in a while, and only the most powerful or foolhardy would dare challenge them. Mortals, on the other hand, had to busy themselves with managing other mortals. Dragons had minions to deal with things that were beneath them. Do you have any ideas about how I can do that? Shork asked. The Merchant Guild would probably work wonders for you, Ilishnesh answered. How so? Normally, the Merchant Guild is an organization that has enough economic clout to influence the politics of any place they set up shop in. They use that influence to help protect their interests. What they won't point out is that they're entirely dependent on local governments to provide their members with a profitable environment. That's one of the biggest reasons why Master Lead so readily cooperates with you in your bid to build up Osalo Pakan. The Merchant Guild cannot expand its operations without the expansion of your authority because you are the sole authority in the area that recognizes their existence. Shork leaned on the stone railing overlooking her clanhole's growing harbour. It wasn't the only infrastructure being raised along the river. Not far upstream, hundreds of workers were preparing a channel for Master Lead's proposed locks, while the clan's new shipyards were being built on the other side of the dam. Directly below them, the river barge loaded with equipment-bound Kira was undergoing last-minute checks before casting off. "I don't mind cooperating with them," the Overlord gestured to the activity below. "Most of what we've achieved here is thanks to their assistance." "That's what they want you to think, anyway," Ilishnesh said. "What do you mean?" Shork looked up at her curiously. "A merchant's greatest obstacle is the authority that controls the land they wish to operate on," Ilishnesh replied. "Economic activity is easily disrupted. If a merchant's trade route goes through a wilderness or they attempt to extract resources from it, then they must deal with the local tribes and bandits. If the local authorities are strong enough to keep the local tribes and bandits at bay, then they're certainly strong enough to disrupt the average merchant." "I wouldn't do anything mean like that," Shork said. "I believe most merchants hope for that response," Ilishnesh said. "It means they can get away with anything for free. You should already be well aware of the cost of maintaining order. On top of that, they may take resources from your land to sell in far-off places and your people won't see a single copper coin out of it. Industries that they set up may occupy valuable space and dump undesirable waste all over the place. Do people do that? When a society gets into the habit of commoditizing and monetizing everything, its people start framing the entire world in those terms. I've even encountered individuals who assert that nothing has value until it is rendered into a product recognizable to their economy." "That has to be a lie," Shork said. "Unfortunately not," Ilishnesh replied. "Can't people just appreciate things for what they are? I mean, what you were describing was sounding like us city folk here, but then it got ridiculous. You are not quite there yet. Maybe you'll get there soon. But I don't want to get there." "Well, I can't help you with that. Anyway, it looks like everyone's ready to go. I'll see you whenever I see you." All right." Shork didn't look too pleased about where their conversation had ended. "Please do what you can to help us out there. We need every advantage that we can get." "I have no idea what's waiting for me out there," Ilishnesh replied, "so I can't reasonably promise you anything." With that, Ilishnesh made her way down to the waterfront. Vltava, Pinecone, and Pebble had already boarded the barge, occupying the space just behind Kaimali and his staff. The rest of the ship was occupied by its crew, their supplies, and thousands of pieces of armor fashioned out of nug leather. The craftsmanship of the equipment was far better than those of more civilized places would have probably expected. This was because any society that herded magical beasts also had access to superior materials. Those materials, in turn, demanded better artisans compared to places that relied on regular beasts like cows, pigs, and deer. In essence, it was the timeless tale of how people in more challenging environments ended up being stronger than their counterparts who chose to live easier lives elsewhere. So, Kaimali turned around to speak to them as they pushed off from the pier. "Are you excited about the trip?" "We've been on a trip for months," Ilishnesh replied. "Oh," the Oselo merchant chuckled. "I guess that's true. For my part, I never expected that I would ever see the world outside of Korstorfi Keral." "That seems to be a common story among urbanites," Ilishnesh said. "They live and die within their city's limits, only ever hearing about the world beyond." "Well, that won't be me," Kaimali said. "I want to see as much as I can. Maybe I'll come by your home one day, eh? What do you think Kira will be like?" "I've heard that it's a large city on a lake," Ilishnesh replied, "so it will probably look like a large city on a lake." She had flown over Roland Gork, or at least the parts that she dared to, several times since her arrival, so she knew far more than that. However, time and experience proved that feigning ignorance often led to people giving away free information in an effort to impress or teach her. "That's what I've heard as well," Kaimali said. "Still, it's the home of a warrior clan. I wonder how different they'll look from us." "They're nah. Aside from that, Those fellows from Kira who came to recruit for the Yorgulan front were all huge. If people like that are having trouble in the east, I can only wonder what they have to fight. Shouldn't you be focusing on your responsibilities as a merchant? Ilishnesh asked. I can at least chat about other things, can't I? Kaimali protested. It's not as if we're doing anything right at this very moment. You know, I used to imagine myself as one of those mighty warriors. Once again, a commonality between multiple races displayed itself. This one, however, made more sense than most. To survive in a competitive and often violent world, most species ended up with an inbred predilection for conflict. Even unintelligent beasts had young that naturally engaged in playfighting, while the children of intelligent races even went so far as to turn mortal conflict into a variety of games. Indeed, mortal societies appeared to glorify conflict. No matter where she went, there was a fighting pit, arena, or any number of monuments raised to immortalize people who had turned mass murder into a profession. What happened, then? Ilishnesh asked. Elingsok happened, I guess, Kaimali answered. Some people are just born to fight and be admired by all. Just by watching her, I knew that I wasn't one of them. It didn't take long for me to give up on my dreams of becoming a warrior, and that turned out to be a good thing. I am far better at what I'm doing now. You don't mind how others perceive you? There are some nasty rumors about you floating around. I'm used to it, Kaimali waved a paw dismissively. So long as my work isn't affected, I could care less about what people say about me. Will you even be able to carry out your work? Ilishnesh asked. Kira may have heard of Osalopakan, but they certainly haven't heard of you. Even after delivering this equipment, they may treat you as a messenger rather than a representative. Believe it or not, Kaimali answered, that is the least of my concerns. You see, I've long learned how to deal with warrior types, and it seems that warrior clans are much the same. They are good at a handful of things and not much else. Trying to portray myself as a representative when I'm a merchant would be too confusing for them. It's possible that they would even take offense at the notion that a non-warrior is trying to speak for a warrior clan. Ilishnesh tried to imagine how Lady Zaradnik might react in the face of Kaimali's assessment, but it was a futile exercise. She had never witnessed anyone say something like that to her before. You seem to have put some thought into your strategy for Kira, Ilishnesh said. How will you ensure that Elingsok's plans for Roland Gork don't go awry? By keeping things simple, Kaimali replied. Instead of trying to assert myself as something they'll refuse to see me as, I will take advantage of the way that they frame things. Kaimali will become the merchant running the route between Korstorofi-Keral and Kira. This crew answers to me, and so any questions or requests must come to me also. Kira, of course, will only discuss matters that they deem me qualified for, which is exactly what I want. For all other matters, I am merely a messenger who will deliver their words to Elingsok. So you mean to employ strategic incompetence? I have to admit that it's a common strategy among the weak. There was a word for it? I wasn't aware. It felt like the correct course of action. Fighting the preconceptions of people who are accustomed to being in charge and whose entire purpose in life is to fight seems like a waste of time and energy to me. Better to be a face that represents a certain aspect of Kira's dealings with Osalopakan. That way, I retain the clout of a warrior clan where I require it while staying out of trouble in everything else. And you learned this while growing up in Korstorofi-Keral? Kaimali shrugged. Where better to learn than at the center of it all? To be fair, everyone is like what I described to some extent, but the clans are especially prickly about it. City folk like myself and Elingsok at least know how and when to be flexible. My objectives in Kira aren't overly ambitious. First, I need to solidify Kira's positive opinion of Osalopakan. Second, they need to remember who I am. I'll work my way up from there in future dealings. This fight against the Yorgulans will be a long one, after all. 2 barges heading in the opposite direction passed them before their ship entered the huge lake that seemed determined to swallow its surroundings. In the weeks that had passed since Shawk started unifying the Korstorfi, the water level had risen by another half-meter, putting tens of thousands of square kilometers of shoreline underwater. The flooding was slowing down, at least, if only because there was so much more space for the incoming water to fill. Ilishnish looked up at the sliver of the moon hanging amidst a pristine field of stars. According to everyone they had spoken to, Rolengork had 2 seasons, wet and dry, and they were already well into the dry season. The skies that stayed clear for weeks at a time supported that notion, yet the flooding continued unabated. Has your trade network brought you any new information related to this flooding? She asked. Aside from the fact that it continues to get worse, no, Kaimali answered. Master Lead says that our reach is expanding at a rapid pace by normal standards, but that still only means we're now covering a 100-odd kilometer radius around Korstorfi. Whatever it is that's causing the flooding is still so far away that information still hasn't trickled down from wherever it's happening. What are the chances that it has to do with the Yorgulan invasion? It was a question that had already been asked several times since they received news of the escalating conflict in the east. Everyone asserted that it was impossible, however, as the Yorgulans had never shown any such capability in all of the generations of their long war with Rolengork. Surely, they reasoned, such power would have been brought to bear long ago if it existed. Ilishnish couldn't say whether their reasoning held or not, but the weather she noticed far to the east suggested that they were wrong about the Yorgulans not being able to flood the basin. Unfortunately, the entire area reeked of green dragons, so she didn't dare get close enough to investigate the cause. What will you do if you discover if it's something that you don't have the power to stop? Ilishnish asked. Do you think that the flooding will continue forever? Kaimali asked back, will nothing remain of Rolengork but a giant lake? I somehow doubt that, but it still leaves your people in dire straits. If the flooding got so bad that it raised water levels throughout the region, someone very powerful would undoubtedly show up to find out what was going on. The Sorceress Kingdom, for instance, wouldn't be very happy if half of its land was flooded. Rolengork's problem would be solved without the beastmen ever understanding what had happened in that case. A piece of flotsam bounced off of the barge's hull with a hollow thunk. Their ship slowed slightly as it entered the currents of the Oraculon, its captain cautiously examining the way ahead. Islands of debris formed out of the settlements that had been swept away by the river, turning their journey into a giant obstacle course. How many days will this add to our journey? Ilishnish asked. It hasn't been a problem for our route so far, the captain answered, but I've seen some blind fools crash into half a house before. We're loaded to the waterline, so some extra eyes calling out potential hazards would be appreciated. Dawn came without incident and they were making their way past Atazli by mid-afternoon. The view from the river wasn't as informative as her flights overhead, yet Kaimali gazed upon the waterfront with a crestfallen look. I knew it was like this from the reports, he said, but seeing the damage in person is something else entirely. It's like a reverse mudslide. The description made a strange sort of sense. Though nothing had been swept uphill, it was just that everyone had been slowly displaced, the way that the countless hovels of the lower city's citizens retreated before the advancing floodwaters made it seem that way. Just looking at it makes you feel so powerless, doesn't it? Kaimali said, it's no wonder all of our guests acted so desperately without trying to save face. Atazli is much smaller than Korstorfi, Ilishnish said. I wonder why it looks so much worse. It's the land that the city was built on, the merchant beside Kaimali said. Atazli was my route early on in the flooding. The whole place was built on a single mountain with low-lying jungle fanning out to the riverbank. 9 out of 10 people here lived in that jungle, now they're all crammed onto the mountain's slopes. From what I've seen, Ilishnish said, most of the urban centers in Rolengork are similarly structured. Clans build their holds at strategically significant high points along the river, then people populate the cities and towns in the lands below. Does that mean this will be a common sight? Some places are less vulnerable to the flooding than others, but, yes, some variant of what you see before you will be commonplace along the major rivers. Any settlements that you see are actually the fortunate ones. Countless towns and villages along the river have already been completely submerged. Where did the people from those settlements go? I can't say for certain, the merchant replied. Any place that offered them shelter, presumably. She doubted that there would be many places that did. Rolengork wasn't a political monolith. In the face of what they considered a natural disaster, every clan prioritized its own members. The way that things were playing out, very few, if any, would have the resources to support refugees. I suppose that it's all a part of Rolengork's story. We're merely present to bear witness to it. Would there be an audience for such a tale? Most humanoids wouldn't care unless she reframed Rolengork as a humanoid nation. Even then, the audience probably wouldn't be appreciative of the tale unless there was an antagonist to defeat. Would the Yorgulans be enough? Or the Green Dragons? Maybe both would work. With 4 shifts of Lup working the paddle wheels, they passed 2 more cities by the end of the next day. Upon confirming their populations, a thought occurred to Ilishnish. The Con tend to live at higher elevations, don't they? Yeah, Kaimali said. What about it? Doesn't that mean they're relatively unscathed by this whole affair? Ilishnish asked, the Irma in the south, as well. That should be the case, Kaimali said. And it's a good thing, too. The Yorgulans aren't the only neighbors we have to worry about. The tribes of the Walled Spine are arguably worse. If they somehow unified, they would be the far greater threat. The southern frontier isn't as bad, the merchant beside him added, but there are still tribes to defend against out there. Any disruptions to trade with the loot would be disastrous for us. Is it really all right to be in such a precarious position? Ilishnish said as she scanned the eastern skyline. It's not as if we chose this, Kaimali said defensively. This is the best we could manage until recently. Under Eelinksok's leadership, we're bound for greater things. Assuming you survive this. Yes, of course, but wait, what are you doing? On the bench behind her, Pebble and Pinecone had pulled their slings out of their packs. Ilishnish looked over her shoulder. Captain? She called out, are we still looking out for potential hazards? Aye, miss. What do you have for us? 1 green dragon. Ilishnish gestured to a distant speck that the captain probably couldn't see. She'll be on top of us in 2 minutes.